Hey everybody, it's Paul Ramsey back with Dr. Manny St. Victor. Manny, how are you?
I'm doing great, Paul. How are you doing tonight?
I'm awesome. I'm excited to dig back into the topic that we had established earlier on the past couple episodes. Really, we've been talking about attention, and I think we've sort of really started to crack open this topic, but now we can really get into the meat and potatoes of it. And thankfully, thanks to you, you're so good at sending stuff that helps me think about this. You sent me a study that explained the role of the posterior cingulate cortex.
Yeah.
Now, last time we talked about the role of the anterior cingulate cortex relating to executive function. So how do we alert, orient, and choose what to really give our attention to, right? But now we're moving to a different part of the brain that is, part of all of this networking that goes on. How would you describe, for folks who aren't real familiar with neuroscience, like what's the basic description of what the PCC handles?
The PCC plays a key role in episodic memory retrieval. That's the key thing I like to think about it doing. I'm somewhere, I recognize the place, my brain needs to retrieve the file that makes me most prepared to do the next best action in that place. So your PCC does that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's taken me a while because for folks like me who haven't gone to medical school and studied this stuff as intensely as you have, there's just a lot going on. But today, reading this piece that you study, and we'll link to the abstract on the blog post. But today, I had this awesome light bulb moment where I realized that all of this stuff we've been talking about, the limbic system, right? We've got all these different parts of the limbic system, and that they're all near each other and connected for a reason, right? It all seems to be like you've got memory and fear and so like the amygdala that controls fear and the hippocampus that helps make memories, and you've got the ACC that helps with attention and all this different stuff. And it seems to me more and more that it's all about this real thing of how do we respond emotionally to things, right?
Yeah. It's how do we respond emotionally, because emotions are a good way of thinking as a readiness state.
Fast.
Okay? Yeah. Like if something flies over and it has a shadow, I don't need to know the data about what it is before I duck under something.
Right.
Right. I'm not going to process whether it's the return of this pterodactyl. I'm going under something just in case.
I get a smell, and immediately either that smell resonates in a positive way or a ooh way away. Right?
Yeah, it's approach or avoid immediately. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's such a powerful thing to think about, is it's not just smells, but that's one of the best places to start priming your mind for how to think about this. Is we take for granted that we process all that in an instant, and we can do that with everything, right? We can do that with what we see. We assess it very quickly and have some kind of an emotional response to it. We can do it with sounds that we hear, people's voices that we recognize or don't recognize. But ultimately, we don't sit, as much as we want to think, right? I get excited thinking about this stuff. We don't sit and rationally like work it all out like we'd like to think. We just lightning fast. This stuff is encoded in us, and we have an emotional response that drives our behavior.
Yep. And then we rationalize it later.
Afterward, right?
Yeah. Once you're already running, you'll be like, well, I'm running because 70% of the time when that sound is heard in the north, it's a no.
Right.
No, you were hauling buckets before that.
So here's where I think a really important connection, and I'm sure you'll be able to help explain this. So last time we talked about the idea, when we were talking about attention, that people can get caught in this alert, orient, and what the third one, alert, orient, and executive function.
Right.
Executive function, and they can get kind of caught up in that thing of like always assessing for, is there a risk, is there a threat, is there a risk, is there a threat? And I think that's one thing that people might resonate with and feel like they always kind of feel stressed and always like, I'm always looking for something to be wrong. But I think another thing is it's not just what we observe and alert to, right? Like sometimes it's generated internally, like negative thinking, negative self-talk, and negative thoughts about ourselves.
Yep.
So how do you if you have this part of your brain, because from the article that you sent me, from the study you sent me, it says that, like, for example, I wrote this note that says, a meta-analysis of MRI studies of 400 patients with ADHD showed an increased size of their left posterior cingulate cortex. So there's some kind of a connection between the way that ADHD people are like always jumping thought to thought to thought to thought, and people just tend to think of it as, well, I can't control that, it's random. But that's a cultivated mechanism connected to some kind of brain predisposition in their formation of their brain, it seems. Yes?
It's what you use grows in your brain. So like they found with the taxi drivers, after a while, they had a bigger hippocampus, the ones in London who had the really complex stuff to learn.
Yeah.
So when you have an abnormality in size in your PCC, you're going to end up with issues of working memory, because you're going to be yanking. With ADHD, the way to think about it is often emotions. Something gets the best of you because when the episodic memory is retrieved for it, it has an emotional aspect.
Right.
So something that shouldn't get your interest that much is more salient than it needs to be. Now, the degree of salience of a stimulus has a lot to do with the way you encoded it. Okay? Like when you saw the thing last time, was it emotionally relevant? Now, why does something have emotional salience? Because it has something to do with your safety, your pleasure, reward, or pain in some way. Now, with ADD, the PCC is also associated with decline in working memory, which is your representations of reality as you're manipulating them.
Okay.
So with ADD, one of the things is that you find a lot of times that a person with ADD has poor task switching, because they're working with something in working memory and something else catches their interest. And instead of putting the thing away as a representation that is usable next time, it might be that they get distracted. And then when they turn back, they have to start over, or they have to recreate the construction, or they have a fuzzy construction that isn't really useful in consciousness for use, because the way you encode something determines how you can manipulate it later. It's called affordances. You know, if I have a crisp vision of a goal, the next time I activate that goal, it's that much easier for me to accomplish it, because it's active, it's encoded with the intentions, it's encoded with distraction intentions, you know. So,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, man, but I just want to clarify. Can I have negative affordances? Can I have unhealthy affordances?
Yeah. If they're wrong, yeah. If you see a situation and you see opportunities to act and they don't exist, if you're misremembering affordances, that is negative.
Okay.
You know, affordances in linguistic terms, think of them as tropes. Okay, so I would say one example of a negative affordance would be the case where the cops saw a dude with his wallet. They thought he had a gun.
Oh.
Okay, it's an affordance is sort of a trope that you pull out and you can act because of it. Okay, you're like, okay, my next action is this, and not to bring a cop example up too often, but if someone is pulled the gun on you, then you open up the affordances of shooting.
Because that's what you're trained to do. You've
exactly
trained and trained and trained, and you've actually created. Okay.
Yeah.
I understand. Yeah.
If I see a swimming pool with a diving board, my diving affordances, my action opportunities come up.
Right. Okay. So now let's go to an even more like broader perspective. All right. Because that's a good example. It helps me think of it. So if I have affordances about like food or smoking, right? If I provide something to myself because I have an affordance that's a way of loving myself or controlling myself, then it makes me more likely to do that instead of thinking of an alternative way to handle the situation?
Yeah, because then those cues become more salient.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Affordances are about choice, and you freak out when you don't have a choice. You get a sense of disempowerment, learned helplessness. The more choices you can put, more affordances, and a metaphor I like to think of is off ramps on the way to the action. The more of those you have, that are manageable, that won't cause you to flip your car over, getting off the highway, the better. And I think of emotions as a vector of velocity. Like if I really want to get to that goal, I'm flying down the highway. So I need each affordance is, okay, I missed my exit, missed my exit, missed my exit. And then you do the behavior. And some people, they don't even see the exits. And they're like, every time I see this cue, I have to do this.
So to sort of wrap back to the beginning of this episode for everyone. So what we're talking about is this idea that you have one part of your brain out of many parts that do a lot of different things, the posterior cingulate cortex, that helps us process emotions and memories, right? Because memories are right there connected with emotional states. And as it does this, it's also switching us back and forth between thinking internally, our internal representations of the world, and it switches to sometimes we have to think about things that are going on externally, and we have to think about those.
Yeah.
And sort of where to wrap it all back to our ongoing topic, which is attention, these things come together. The power of the emotion often dictates then where our attention really goes to.
Yeah, it does.
Okay. So what we need to do then is we need to use hypnosis or self-hypnosis to help ourselves and others learn how to better manage these emotional responses and states so that they can create new and different outcomes, new and different affordances in some cases.
Yeah. Yeah. So that they can create choice, which is power.
Right. And that's what we want. And choice, I'm so glad you said that word, because I think that's a real key, right? Is a lot of times when people get trapped in these loops of behavior, it's because all this stuff is going on behind the scenes that they take for granted, that they have, their PCC managing their internal emotional processing without them ever asking it to. It just does it. And they've conditioned and learned to have like recurring thoughts. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I don't have power over this. There's nothing I can do about it. And they're running these scripts, right? They're running these scripts and running these scripts.
Yep.
We need a way to break that loop, to break that script and create something new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because one thing to keep in mind is that your emotions affect which memory you retrieve. If you walk into a room and you're angry, then you're going to pull up your anger-related memories for that context.
Right.
And then you'll rationalize it. Because then, once you're good and angry,
yeah.
now you're like, because last time, and you see this displacement of aggression a lot of times, because last time this happened.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, you're committed to it now. You're in angry mode. So your ability to stop the anger, stop the shame, and sometimes these are subliminal emotions, subconscious emotions, like a toxic shame. It's easier to think of that as contempt,
Right.
Right. So by slowing down the intensity of the emotion, you're able to kind of see the exits on the highway and give yourself the ability to consider ramping off before doing the thing, the inevitable, quote unquote.
So here's what I want to do. I feel like that's a good time length for people to digest this stuff. It's the next step. Let's come back next time and let's devote the next episode completely to helping people identify things that get their attention that they wish wouldn't get their attention so much, and how they can break out of those loops or patterns and forge a new, healthier, more productive pattern. Yeah?
Exactly. I'd love to do that.
All right. That's our next episode then, you guys. So again, check out our earlier stuff. We'll provide some links in the blog post to the earlier episodes in case you missed them. You can track through this whole thing and get through in our next episode. That's what we'll do. We'll talk really, we'll hopefully get some people into a live session with us, and we'll talk about how you can take these things that have sucked up your attention too much, that you're giving too much attention to, and that you feel powerless to take your attention away from. You just feel like it's sort of got you stuck and trapped in giving a lot of attention to something that you wish you weren't. And we'll talk about how to break out of that pattern, to crush those loops, and to create new and better systems for yourself. Awesome. That's going to be so great. Manny, thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul. It's always a pleasure.
All right, you guys join us for Hypnotic Thoughts. I'm Paul Ramsey.
I'm Dr. Manny St. Victor.
Y'all have a great day. Be good.